I mean, is that gorgeous? I mean, anybody that knows horses can completely relate to that. I mean, it's beautiful even if you don't, but just he's whinnying, it's coming out, you know, his tongue is a little bit there, you know, the place that the ear is, you know, everything is there in a way that I personally could never do, and I don't know how many people, you know, are so skilled that they could these days. It's the art of someone that knew their subject so well and knew their medium so well. And it's tens of thousands of years old. It's just stunning to me. Every time I first saw cave art when I was about 17, and if anything, it's become more miraculous since then. When we think about, let me see if this thing, there we go. Yeah, so we're going to talk about a number of things here, and deep time in particular is what we, I think, have the most trouble with. Here's a bison, 15,000 years old. This is from the northern Spanish site of Altamira. And the intense color that they get, you know, like I said, they know their materials. They know the ochre in the area, the charcoal that they need. It's amazing. It's sometimes called the Sistine Chapel of Paleolithic art. So, but deep time. It's, in any of the origin sciences, it's hard to relate to the unimaginably long periods of time that we're dealing with. If it's 13 billion years old for the beginning of the universe, 4.5 billion for the age of the Earth, we somehow just have to sort of take it that stuff happened and happened and happened and happened, and then, you know. But for cave art, we're kind of at that in-between stage where you could almost relate to it. You know, if you think about a human generation typically being on average about 20 years, you can imagine putting your hand on your child's shoulder. She's about to step off, you know, onto the bus, 6 years old, first day of school. You've got your hand there, and so you're behind her, and you can think of your mother putting her hand on your shoulder, and then her mother on her shoulder, and back and back and back. You'll get about 5 of these per 100 years. So about 50 per 1,000 years. And so you can kind of think, you know, in those terms, just holding back and back and back, 5,000 and then 10,000. And you get into this range of between 10 and 40,000 years ago. And it's like you can almost see it. So this is one of the things that I think is so tantalizing about this art. To start back just a bit longer ago than that, we've had speakers before in the program talk about human evolution. We branched off from the line that led to chimpanzees, gorillas, other great apes at varying points between about 15 million and 6 million years ago. Our first upright ancestors appear to be from about these 6 to 5 million years ago. And of course, Lucy famously around 3 million, and we've had talks recently also about Artie, who's a little bit older and has that beautiful transitional foot going, sort of, you can see always taking that step. At a certain point, we have upright posture, we start to get a bigger brain, and this is when you see stone tools arise for the first time. Now, you might not automatically think of stone tools as art. But if you think, some of you may have heard the explanation, how does a great sculptor work? Well, you look at the block, you see the art, the sculpture in there, and you take away the parts that aren't the sculpture, right? And you think, well, that's kind of a flip explanation, but it actually, I think it's really quite deep, because that is how you make a stone tool. It is in its way a sculpture. Right? These are the oldest tools, oldest stone tools that we know of. There may well have been things made out of wood, sticks, bark, you know, unprocessed rock, antlers, just about anything you might find. I mean, surely there were, because of course chimpanzees do a little bit of that. But these are called Oldowan tools. They're sometimes called pebble tools because it's not really worked very much. You sort of pick the thing up and you knock a couple parts off, and you've got some kind of a chopper. I have here my own version that I made of an Oldowan sort of scraper thing, which you can look at. One thing to notice is it's really thick through here. People that are really good at this can make these beautiful thin tools. I cannot, maybe if I had a lot of practice. So anyway, but you see these, 2.6 million years ago. Again, this inimaginable period of time. And coming right up until 400,000 years ago, which is maybe not as long ago, but still very, very long ago. But it sat there for well over 1 million years. Then you get these hand axes, and again, it overlaps quite a lot with the Oldowan tool types. You can see how much thinner that one is. Just to make this point a little more, what did I do with that pointer? There we go. With the Oldowan, and this is a very late Oldowan, right, 400,000 years ago, it's still quite thick through the middle. You can see that this has been worked on both sides. The oldest Oldowan tools seem to be worked just sort of on one face there, and sometimes just on the edge. Yeah. So there. We also categorize cultures by their stone tool type. And it gets complicated because often you have multiple different organisms using the same kinds of tools. So these are Neanderthals. And here we're overlapping a bit with that last slide. Around 600,000 years ago, you start to see Neanderthals in Europe and Asia. And these are the Ice Age times. So they're, it's thought that these folks were adapted to very, very cold temperatures. They have brains that were quite a bit larger than ours, actually, which is kind of counterintuitive because you hear this story going along from Lucy on up that the brain's getting bigger and bigger. Well, it actually is biggest in the Neanderthals. Some of them have brains that are 2,000 square centimeters, right? 2,000 cc brains. We average about 1,350, right? Although there's a range of size in ours as well. But they were generally over 1,500. Their brains. And yet they're depicted as these sort of dumb creatures, right? Part of that was because when the first one was found, he was very old and had rickets and arthritis and a lot of problems he'd had. And people thought they were sort of stooped and that maybe they were stupid because of that. And so you'll get some of these pictures like this. But it does show some of the anatomical features. So you can see that the nose on this guy here it's really large, and they have what's called a mid-facial projection. So the whole head is big, the face is big, the nose is big. Some people have suggested that the reason that the nose was so big was that it warmed the air so that they weren't shocking their lungs. I don't know if that's the case or not, but it's an interesting adaptation and very, very different. And the discussion on Neanderthals has gone sort of full swing from saying in the 30s, some of the folks that were trying to sort of defend Neanderthals said, well, dress him up with a hat, put him on the subway, you'd never know who it was, right? And others say, well, no, yeah, you kind of would. It would look a little odd. And then there was a lovely site found, a burial site basically, we call it that, Shanidar Cave in Israel. And this Neanderthal who was quite old, had lots of accidents and bad things happen, had a shriveled arm, had a broken leg, all these things. He was quite old. Now, he could not have survived if people hadn't been helping him, right? And he was buried with what turned out to be pollen from wildflowers. So they had buried this person. He was clearly had some kind of status in the community, and covered the grave with wildflowers. And this became of interest sort of in the 60s, and you can see how that kind of went along with what people were looking for, a kind of calmer, kinder, gentler ancestor, right? Then through about the 90s, people started again to say, no, it wasn't our species. It's a different species, right? And maybe they could talk, maybe they couldn't talk. A lot of this discussion going on. And people had pretty much decided it must be another species, and by people I mean folks in the profession, until some of the genetic data came out not long ago that shows quite a lot of overlap with modern Homo sapiens sapiens, which is to say us. And so now you're seeing kind of a swing back to saying, well, maybe we were interbreeding with these at moments where the populations came into contact. And you can understand that it wouldn't necessarily be very often that they would, because Homo sapiens sapiens comes up from Africa, whereas these folks are adapted to very cold temperatures, and they're up in, especially in the, well, they retreated to the north with the glaciers. So there wouldn't be that many points of overlap necessarily. So it could be what we call a small conduit of gene flow, right, back and forth. The most recent data that I've seen on this suggests that actually East Asians have more Neanderthal, share more ancestry, recent ancestry with Neanderthals than anybody else, which of course is enormously counterintuitive because Asians are sort of the extreme of modern Homo sapiens with very flat face. These guys have this mid-facial projection. So it goes to show that you really can't rely always on features that stand out to us. They aren't necessarily indicative of genetics, right? Our ancestries are always more complicated than we think they are, I think. Anyway, Neanderthals were associated with this Mousterian tool culture, it's sometimes called. And it gets the name from a site in France called Le Moustier, which is in the Dordogne region, which is north of the Pyrenees. And you can see here that these tools are much thinner. They're much more sophisticated than the Acheulean tools that Homo erectus and those folks used. But they are very persistent. You don't see a lot of change in tool type until much later. And you can see here the dates we've put on there between 300,000 and 30,000 years. It's a very long time. The 30,000, it's a bit late, and the last 10 or 15,000 years of that is what's often called the Châtelperronian, which is kind of a mix between the Mousterian and the sort of modern Homo sapiens associated tool types. But you'll see, particularly in the Levant region, you'll see some sites that are inhabited by Mousterian culture using folks, and then by tool cultures more associated with modern humans. And it sort of goes back and forth over 10 or 100 years periods. So it gets, one thing about looking at things that are more recent is you have a whole lot more data to look at, and it gets messier and messier and messier. So, but anyway, so in the Dordogne you have those, but they're throughout the Neanderthal range. Now, as I said, this gets complicated. The Mousterian and Châtelperronian are the ones that are associated primarily with Neanderthals, although you will find some anatomically modern Homo sapiens using Mousterian tool types from time to time. The rest of these are associated with what often gets called the out of Africa folks, us basically, who came out of Africa about 100,000 years ago. The Kafsa site in Israel is about 90,000 years ago, and that would really be somebody that you could put on the metro and say, oh, it's just one of us. It really is. So these are all associated later times, and these all basically get their names from France. France is a rich source of these tool types and fossils as well. So we're going to look at these in a little bit more depth.
Neanderthals are mostly from the cold climates. How come most pictures, including yours, show them minimally clothed?
Isn't that a great point, you know? It's again, we have it in our mind that there's sort of this order and it ascends to us. And so people that were older and maybe didn't use the same kind of tools we used must be sort of primitive, and therefore they must not be good at making clothes. And if you look at the Neanderthal tools, they have tools for making clothes. They have, you know, things that are clearly associated with ornamentation, and yeah, it's an excellent point. I used that slide because it's public domain. So you don't want to step on anybody's toes, but you know, we should really commission some to be done.
Did the Neanderthals emerge in northern Europe and Asia? Where
did they come from?
Is there a link?
There is a link. So it's of course more complicated than what I just, the gloss that I just gave it. there were groups of hominids coming out of Africa, well, for the past 2 million years. Right? And there would be a wave out, and maybe they would disappear, or maybe they would come back. I don't, but there was a wave out at 1.8 million years, the group that ended up inhabiting the Russian, the Caucasus region of Georgia. For a while. At 1.8 million years ago, these were not Homo sapiens. They were either a late habilis or a Homo ergaster, something like that, or somebody might say an early Homo erectus, I think is what some people are wanting to call it now just because it makes it tidier. But it's a real messy situation. One thing about us, we move, right? We're curious. We go do stuff. We see something over there. And while they weren't exactly us, this is a hominid with a big brain that's using tools. This is a curious creature, right? So you'll get these waves out of various kinds. And you have actually, even in Indonesia, where the type specimen of Homo erectus comes from, you have some that are from that period. But they don't, it doesn't seem likely that they continued on there. It seems likely that there were continuous, or not continuous, but repeated waves coming out. So you had then, over the past million years or so, an increasing frequency of this. And from about 500,000 years ago, you have continuous habitation of some area. Not specific caves or sites or that sort of thing, but they're popping up all over. And you've got names given to these. Broadly speaking, you could say it was Homo erectus, and then it was what we call archaic Homo sapiens, so we kind of hedge the bet in between. But these were largish-brained folks, almost as large as ours, but clearly not quite, with fairly complicated tool culture. Often it's these older one, these late older one tools, like I had the picture of there. These things, you see, this is 400,000 from Spain. And yet it's thick, it's basically an older one tool, although more sophisticated than what you see at 2 million. But these probably were coming up with people, and at the same time you have, again, in the late older one and the early Acheulean, you have people occupying some of the same sites using these different things. And these are different groups of Homo sapiens. Again, we're busy creatures. So anyway, the point is, Neanderthals are descended from one of those waves out. If you want to call it an archaic Homo sapien or a Homo erectus that got a foothold and developed these cold adaptations in situ. So, and then as the ice sheets came down and then retreated, they would end up following that sort of edge because, of course, not very many people do well, the Eskimos being about the only modern culture we know of that does well on a really straight up Arctic sort of a situation. Anyway, then they contacted groups of modern humans coming up from Africa. So I build this as being about France nominally, and we'll concentrate a little bit more on that now. These are just representative stars. There are sites all over southern France here, particularly in the Pyrenees area and the Dordogne, which is the north part of the Aquitaine region there, Aquitaine region. And then also going over important sites in northern Spain. And you can see this is continuous. Partly it's good preservation, and partly I think it was sort of a hotbed of culture there. Here is the Cro-Magnon skull, which is basically us. The differences between this and the Kafsa skull from Israel from 90,000 years, and this is from about 35,000, are very, very slight. I mean, this is basically the same thing. Now, compared to folks living today, to us, our brains are still just a little bit smaller even than the Cro-Magnon and the Kafsa skull. But here you can see on the bony features the differences, the very large nose, the midfacial projection there, whereas we have these small faces. So, and the large brain was set well behind the brow, whereas ours is more over the top. So. But these are the folks that were making the tools and eventually the art in France. So, from about 40,000, 45,000, up until about 25,000, there's a particularly strong culture type identified called the Aurignacian. It comes from, the original site was found in Aurignac, which is in the Pyrenees. And you can see these are quite a different kind of tool than we were looking at before. They're much more nimble. They're smaller in some ways. They're more precise. Right? The Aurignacian, do I have a slide? Yeah, okay. The Aurignacian culture spread throughout Europe, and it lasted a long time. And they struck their tools. They used, instead of working on the main part of the rock, they prepared a core and then struck a blade off, or a sharp, what's called a flake off, and then they worked with the flake. They knew how to shape their core that they would strike from in a way that you get these nice clean flakes off of, and then you'd be able to retouch them. They were very, very good at this. And perhaps not surprisingly, this is where we start seeing these gorgeous artworks. This is Chauvet Cave that was just discovered in 1994. There'll be a facsimile of it open to the public next year. Just amazing things. The main area that's painted in the cave in Pont d'Arc Cave is about 32,000 years old. And then there was a slight, a small inhabitation a bit later on. But the cave was buried by basically a landslide, and it probably sat there untouched from 23,000 years ago until the folks hiking, speleologists, found it in 1994. And the last human that had gone in that cave before they opened it up, there were footprints of a child that at 23,000 years ago had walked into the cave and then left. And then there was nobody until 20 years ago. Yeah. It really, I mean, I found it very evocative. So, and you see these things here, and you could tell, I mean, these are these wonderful horses. This is a woolly rhinoceros. You can see the horn, you can see everything that he has on there. There's another one of a couple of rhinoceroses, and they look like they're butting horns, like they're competing, you know. So again, the depth of feeling for these things is astonishing. And the horses, I think we have a better picture than that, but you can see how the mane of the horse is standing up like that, like the current Kowalski's wild horses. Just the details. So. These are, so also in the Aurignacian, the oldest human figures. And I know we had a bit of a discussion last week about the lion man here. It's a large item. Older than that even is this, from the same cave system, this Venus of Hohlefels. And it's one of the more exaggerated Venus figures of them, 40,000 years old. We don't know what the cult of Venus figures was, but it was widespread for a very, very long time, even up to within the past 10,000 years. You get these Venus figurines. And of course, speculation is wild about, were they fertility goddesses? Were they a female-dominated culture? Were they something related to seasons or stars? Or people have had, speculation has been all over the board on this. But very, very interesting, and particularly interesting in the context of the Lion Man, who is sort of two things at once. What two or more things is the Venus figurine being at once? Here's from a slightly different, a slightly later time period. So the origination gives way to the Gravettian, which is a little bit more sophisticated tool type. And you can see that the Venus figurines become even more stylized in this case. This particular Venus of Lascaux, which is another place in the Pyrenees, Picasso owned 2 replicas of this. And he went back to them again and again and again for inspiration on where to, how to see nature, how to interpret form, because that's what he was really doing, interpreting it, taking it apart, putting it back together. Is kind of what art does. All kinds. These are Gravettian burins, so these are things that you use to make holes in hide or in antler or stone or teeth. You would take one, and whatever you were working on, you would just keep drilling away. If they'd had TV, they would have done it while they were watching TV. But so you find some even more finely worked things. And in this time period, let's see here, you find even more elaborate cave art. This is the cave of Pechmerle, which is a bit to the north of the Pyrenees. They seem to have been very interested in spots. You'll find spots in all of the different cave sites, or most of them, but it's really reaches its maximum here. And you can see you have these handprints, and then accompanied by spots. And even their horses have spots. And for a long time, again, we have this vision of people that lived a long time ago as necessarily being primitive and not having the mental capacities that we have. They say, well, this must be representative of something. They're not, they didn't have horses there at that time like that. Well, some DNA studies have been run in the past few years on material from horses living in this time period. And there is a significant fraction, around, I think it's 10 or 15% of the horses living at that time were spotted. And it's the leopard Appaloosa pattern, if you're familiar with horses. It's the same pattern, the same genetics, the same genes that produce spotted horses today. And it shows, from an evolutionary perspective, of course, you have variation in populations, and that variation gets acted upon by natural selection, and it produces, particular effects. Well, we may be seeing here early artificial selection, right? They weren't keeping these horses. They didn't have them confined places, although there's a little bit to suggest maybe they did a little bit, but they certainly weren't domestic horses. But you could imagine that if they really liked the spotted ones, that they would kill the brown ones or the black ones and eat those instead, and leave the spotted ones to run, which of course would be a selective regime favoring the spotted ones. And so they could well have produced their own breeding program without intending it at all. And that's kind of the way natural selection works a lot. It's just not always the picture that's presented to us. So I just find these things wonderful. I like horses anyway, so. Here's another of these Venus figurines. This is from the Landes region, which is to the on the Atlantic side, just a bit north of the Pyrenees. This is 28,000 years old. I don't know if these are braids or if there's a net of some kind over her hair. Or his, I guess I should say. I think it's a Venus figurine. It's largely regarded as that, but it's true that we're inferring based on other art of the other prehistoric art. It'd be nice to know what the rest of her looked like, or him. So moving on from that time period, the next is the Solutrean. And the Solutrean has these beautiful leaf-shaped blades, points. Some of them, they're so fine that they were probably not used for practical purposes. They were probably art. And you see the sort of two lines coming together there that way. And you get, again, more Venus figurines from this one. This one's particularly interesting because I don't know if you can see it or not. She's holding a horn, which, again, if you accept the idea that these are fertility or you know, in some manner representing fertility, could this be the prototype of the cornucopia? You know? Or is she just drinking? Did they use them for, you know, other things? It's the sort of thing that you just, I wish we knew more. And then we're not going to, there was no writing, so we're not going to find out, at least so far as we know thus far. But it's just the amazing variety of things that you run into. And of course, from this time period, Solutrean to Magdalenian, Lascaux, the famous Lascaux paintings. This is an oryx, A-U-R-O-C-H-S. It's probably an ancestor of modern cattle in some manner. They were very big. This is the cave at Lascaux. Some of these were damaged. When Lascaux was found, they used to let people in to see all of the wonderful art, and for decades they let them in. And the oxygen coming in, the light that people would bring in, damaged them. And this is why Chauvet itself is not not visitable, but they're making the facsimile cave. And the same thing with Niaux in France, in the Pyrenees. They've got you can still visit it, but only 2 trips a day. And they have a facsimile at the Prehistoric Art Center in Tarascon, nearby. Yeah, more oryx. So you get in this period a lot of oryx and a lot of bison. And again, you get the speculation. Is this because they saw them as some kind of deity? Is it because they thought that if they killed them in art, that they would be able to kill them on their hunting expeditions? As a kind of a way of magical hunting, sometimes called. Was it art for its own sake? There's this wonderful stag from Lascaux. It's going, I think, even beyond the stylization of the oryx and the bison and even the horses. There's something about this animal, this stag. You know, there were animals at that time, right, deer, that had enormous horns, but not in this manner, right? And it's especially, it seems to me, you see how that there are twos, there are pairs of these branches of the antlers. Around this time as well, and I don't have a picture of it, but you'll find stones on which people have dug holes, and they're often in pairs. And they seem to track they seem to track the phases of the moon. And so on some of them, if that's what they're doing, you'll have 3.5 years marked on the stone, as much as that. And these pairs of things, and you find these pairs of dots as well, again with the dots. There's a lot of dots around, not so much as Peshmeral, but you've got 2, my thing is giving out, you have 2 there, you have a pair there, you have a pair there. This too was clearly a concept that was important to them. And I like also about this guy the way the mouth is just slightly open. You know, he's about to do something. We're not quite sure what. And here's a broader view. Here's another of the stags. They're not quite as stylized.
I remember seeing a figure in the Israel Museum in Jerusalem in a very special glass case that rotated, that was supposed to have been the earliest example of figurative art, a Venus that you could barely determine was man-made. It could have been, you know, created by nature, but it was claimed that this was the first man-made. Are you familiar with that? It was not nearly as detailed as the Venus that you showed us.
I don't know. I don't know about that, no. I'd be interested to hear what that was.
With regard to the Venus figurines, do you know of any overtly masculine, like, statues?
That's a good question. Well, the Lion Man, of course, seems to be a man. But for the most part, you don't get statues that look like men. But what you get are a lot of markings on rocks that appear to be penises. And you also get some that look like vulva, or vulva stones, they're called. And you get a lot of these. You get them through increasingly as you get into the Magdalenian. So there was, again, it's so hard to say what it meant to people, you know, but it was clearly a very important way of representing. And if you, for those of you who are coming on our tour to France, you'll see some of these. They have them in the Niaux and other caves.
What size are these figures?
Oh, they're small.
They're tiny.
For the most part, they're small. Yeah, the Lascaux is a bit larger, and the Lion Man is very unusual in being it's like that tall. But yeah, for the most part, they're small. Some of them have little holes in them that they were probably worn.
Did any storytelling emerge in these in the art?
So there's a whole lot of storytelling on the part of the anthropologists, as you've been seeing, right? And I mean, I guess there are no stories that are unequivocal, right? But then nothing, you know, any kind of art or any kind of story we have, unless you're like part of the immediate culture, you know, of a children's book or something. But anything that's just sculptures or just paintings, there's always more going on there. And of course, we keep coming up with stories about Leonardo da Vinci and what it really means in his paintings and stuff. So if you know, if you give just a little bit of latitude, the woolly rhinoceros squaring off, you know, it's a story. To me, it's a story. You know, I don't think that the hunting magic explanation or the sort of deity looking down holds for that. It's two, you know, of these animals, you know, involved in the rutting season, right? Or well, I mean, it's not deer, but it's that sort of a thing. It's two of them at any rate, defending territory, if not females. These oryx, they're looking at each other. It's not just, you know, they're not just put up there sort of randomly, and each one is beautiful in and of itself, but they make these panels, you know. Is this the foreground, and that's the background, and the deer are back there? You see there's a little horse here running. Is this representing space? Is it representing time? It seems like there are multiple stories involved here. We've got, I think, let me see some of these other pictures. You can just look at them forever, it seems like. Like I said, this guy here, his mouth is open, and he has this wonderful train behind him. It's almost as if the wind is bringing him in somewhere. And then again, with the painted dots beneath him, it's the same color. It's done at the same time. It's not writing, you know, but it probably tells a story of some kind to those who are initiated. So, so that would be my feeling about it. So the question of how this comes about, right? Until recently, we didn't quite know how some of this effect was made. And it turns out they produce it by grinding up the ochre or whatever the pigments were in your mouth. You chew it, and then you spit it onto the surface in a bunch of. They've been able to reproduce this. Some of the experts that have been studying these caves are able to reproduce these things. And it makes this wonderful, you know, smoky sort of an effect there that adds so much to it. So all these hands, someone was spit painting around the outside of their hand and then leaving it. You'll also find some where the hand was put in and put up, but a lot of it is the spit painting around, and the animals as well. You know, one of the strangest things is that you don't find them practicing. We don't see them outside the cave, you know, stuff on the wall or this. We find these perfectly done things. How or where or why? You know, they surely weren't able to do it without practicing. How did they do it? You know, where were they practicing these things? Because they're quite expert in these paintings that you find. But anyway, at least that part of how is clear. Oh, and here's another wonderful example. One of the caves that we'll see on the trip is Gargas, also in the Pyrenees. And they have a lot of these hands. There are not very many paintings. You know, there's animals, things like that. It's hands and hands and hands in Gargas. I don't know. It's not children practicing because they're big, but it's interesting. It's probably very meaningful. You do see the hand outlines associated sometimes with some of the other more abstract, the carvings, relief carvings of the penises and the vulva, and some of the paired indentations of things. So again, it's not writing, but it's possible that there's more story there than we realize. I mean, how would we know, not being enmeshed in that culture? What else do we have here? Yeah, also at Gargas, you have other representational things. These are the incisors of horses, and the root has been pierced at the top. They had necklaces of horse teeth. Unfortunately, we don't have any. There's sort of burials with them in situ to see the, what else was on them and that sort of thing. But they're, yeah. And then Niaux cave is 12 to 17,000. There are a lot of bison. There's what they call the salon noir, the black room. And on the ceiling are a lot of these animals. And there's bison after bison after bison after bison. And I don't know if, some might say, right, oh, it was a cult of bison. This was, these are different religious differences or whatever. Maybe they were hunting bison primarily. Maybe they were good at drawing bison. This is an interesting figure here. It's a deer or antelope or baby bison, perhaps, but it looks like a deer. And, is that by accident that there's a line going down there from the cave? Or does it indicate, a spear? Very often, and you see this in Niaux perhaps better than anywhere else, the artist worked with the surface of the cave. And so in this instance here, and here again, see, there's another one right there going in. Those are lines in. Those are not painted on. They're natural features of lines in the rock. But it bulges out here. The cave it bulges out there, just where the bison would have had the width of chest, that sort of thing. And you can see the mane up there. This one has the little ears. Just such detail with so few strokes, I think, is the thing. So, and here's one, the sort of cubist bison from Niaux. And you can see that it's superimposed. You've got the bison with his face going down here, and then you have with the face turned that way as well. So he's two bison in one. This is from another of the Magdalenian sites. In fact, the Magdalenian, the one that the type locality. People are pretty well convinced that what this is a sort of a mosquito bite or a welt produced by some kind of insect. And here's the bison turning around and licking the welt. Now, maybe it's something they saw one day, or maybe, like you said, there's a story here, perhaps a legend or something that's reflected there. I leave them up for you to see because I think it's nice to bring your own view to them rather than have me say, I think this and this and this, because it is such an area where there's lots of room for different ideas, and to just appreciate them just as art. Grotte de la Vache is another in the Ariège, which has things from about the same time period. You find a lot of carved bone and antler in this cave. And here you have the deer, the head of a deer on a long bone. This might have been part of an atlatl, a spear-throwing device. Here's another one. These are lions. When they're following the tail of the other one coming there. It's too bad we don't have the whole piece of it. And again, you notice lions have whiskers. The animal has whiskers. They are dots in pairs. And I also just love the way that the neck is arched there. And it's just, it has such a feeling of movement in it. So this is Bedayak. Bedayak is a cave. It was actually used as a hangar in World War II for some of the resistance. The Pyrenees were never completely occupied in World War II. And so you'll find a whole lot of interesting things in the Pyrenees, stuff that went on there. It's privately owned. You can go. They speak only French. And then heavily laden with patois, so you wouldn't necessarily, it's a bit of a strain. But the guy that owns it is this complete character. He's a riot. This little guy, and he goes on and on and on about it. He'll say, "You may have heard that," but it's wrong. Of course, we've never heard whatever it is he's complaining about. Somebody said it, 20 years before or something. He makes the point that a lot of Americans are making now too. Don't call them cavemen. They didn't live in the cave. They went in the cave, they painted there. You don't have burials in there, you don't have other things happening. They weren't habitation. They went in there to do the paintings and the carvings. Here is well, they call it a plaque. It's probably part of a pendant or hair accessory, some kind. A bison, pierced in the middle with a burin. It's a young bison. Don't know if it might have been worn by a young lady or something. Again, people start talking about fertility rates. They go straight to fertility rates on a lot of this stuff, so I get pretty skeptical. But I mean, this is an amazing piece. It's a deer. This thing is about had it. So the ears, he's looking back toward his tail, and he's got his legs here like he's in motion coming down the side of the mountain. And it's 17,000 years old, like that. Yeah. And this, Magdalenian from the Dordogne, this is an extinct hyena, extinct species of hyena. On one of these spear throwers, and he looks as if he's launching the spear. He's got all this power he's putting into it, and this was clearly used a lot. This is not just wear from being old and getting stepped on or something. This thing was used, and it was retouched several times as things broke off. It was clearly a very beloved piece for the individual that had it and presumably made it. And at the end of the Magdalenian, you get into things that are much more, in a way, modern looking, right? They don't quite participate in that sensibility. It's stunning. This is from about 12,000 years ago, well, 11,000. These are two reindeer, and so this is with the last retreat of the Ice Age. You had a lot of reindeer around. Is a female, and she's displayed, the teats are carved on the underside. She's got her ears back, and they're swimming in the water. And here's a male behind her who also has the genitalia depicted, so these are not just inferences. He's swimming right behind her. As the ice retreated and you got a more temperate climate, you had the reindeer coming through, populations of animals were going up, of grazing animals, that sort of thing, browsers as well. And they were seeing migrations. Right, just as we see on the savanna in Africa today. And this is probably a depiction in some manner of that. It's not too much of a stretch to think that it's part of some kind of legend. But a rather different, as I say, different sensibility there. What do we have here with the, yeah. So I want to talk here a little bit before we go to the end. That was me at Niaux Cave. this question of why or how is it that we have a mind that's able to do art, right? Not just hands. How is it that we get this from, I would think, really, being able to envision stone tools and make these? There are two, I don't know if you want to call them traditions, but there are two views in evolutionary biology these days, and they call each other names. Okay. One of the names that one group calls the other is adaptationist. And adaptationists tend to, I mean, anytime you put ism at the end, then you know that somebody's trying to make a point. Adaptationists tend to look at every detail of an organism and say that that's for something, that there's a reason, it's everything that works is an adaptation, something created by natural selection to serve that particular purpose. The other group says that you have a lot of stuff that's inherited, that is part of the ongoing evolutionary stream that maybe is not specifically for anything, even though it might sort of work. And so one of the questions is, and to give an example, everybody, I think, accepts that birds' wings that fly is a beautiful adaptation built by natural selection for this incredible aeronautics. But not all birds actually use their wings for flying. We have a lot of flightless birds. And there's a particular species of egret that doesn't fly very much, although it can fly, but it uses its wings to shade the water. So it brings them up over its head to shade the water to get the fish. Now, the wing is manifestly not an adaptation for shading the water. It's an adaptation for flying. But here's an animal that has used that. And the term exaptation has been given to this kind of a use, where there's not a secondary modification, right? But there are a lot of things that morphology, anatomy, behavior can do that were not necessarily put there by natural selection, if you want to see it that way, for its current use. And an example, another example, we know that when babies are born, they have this soft spot on top of their head, right? Because you have skull bones that, as you grow, fuse together. And you'll hear people say, well, it's an adaptation to being born because the baby would not be able to get its head out through the birth canal otherwise if it couldn't sort of contract. And this is why they're all purple and, gooey when they come out. But all mammals have those plates. It's something that we inherited from the way that the very first vertebrates were put together. So it's not an adaptation. It's useful for that, but it's clearly not an adaptation for that. And so the question then is art, is the mind that we have, our brain power, an adaptation for being smart, for being able to do all the things that Bob Richards talked about a couple weeks ago of art and mathematics and this sort of thing? Or is it a side consequence of some other feature? And one of the most interesting views on that I've heard lately is Jeffrey Miller's work saying that perhaps artistic ability, and broadly, ability to make art, to make jokes, to make language and tell stories. Perhaps this is all part of a regime of sexual selection, so that the guys that were able to do this were more impressive to the females, and that this is what we've been selected for, and this is where all of that creative impulse comes from. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you very much.